This video is not intended for children. Viewer discretion is advised.
If you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Hat trick. I did the hat trick today, Adega. I did good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and here in a little while, I will say good night.
Awesome.
The streaming hat trick, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so very much, everyone who is here. Mark Damnably Tired, Mr. Hyde, Positive Candor, Colin P. Smith, Crimson Mist, MacGyver, Robert Pearson, Lady Mist, the Guardian of the Void is here, ladies and gentlemen. Lori Roberts, Castle, Mary's Game Room. Hello, Mary. Capia Star, good morning. See, dude, good morning. Oh, my Lord. I'm locked in. Good morning. Good evening, everyone. How is everyone doing out there tonight? Nina Green. Hello, Nina. Robert Pearson. I don't know if I said that already. Colin P. Smith. Good evening, sir. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here because we are going to talk about one of the coolest fighting forces and one of the coolest battles. We've got the Spartans and we've got the Battle of Thermopylae that we are going to talk about today. And then Adega is rocking Leonidas. And I have got the image of Themistocles. And believe it or not, guys, there were two battles going on. There were two battles going on at the exact same time. The battle at the hotgates and the battle, the armada led by Themistocles against the Persian armada on the water, while Leonidas led his 7,000 forces, 7,000 strong army against the Persians. And I know what you're saying. Loki, wasn't there only 300? Yes, but there were more. There were more. The Greeks had assembled an army of 7,000. Leonidas was only able to take 300 Spartans, though.
They did have a bunch of neighboring cities, neighboring countries that contributed. There was some of the history, because we're going to do a lot of history.
Oh, yeah.
A King Darius the First of Persia was not a very nice guy. In fact, he ruled so viciously that there were revolts all the time over his kingdom. And in one of those revolts of the Ionians,
yes,
the Greeks decided to side with them, and also the Elonians. I believe it was Elonians. And Darius was so pissed. He said, you know what? We're going in and we're going to teach these guys a lesson for trying to stand up to the Persian army. And guess what? The Greeks beat him. And before he could come back, he started gathering forces. Another uprising in his country showed up, and he got killed fighting his own people. That's how horrible of a person he was. Which brings in Xerxes, his son.
Yes. And he looks like the big giant bastard in Snyder's 300 movie. He's the big hairless ape-looking son of a bitch.
All the piercings and walks on people's backs. And that's probably not too far from the truth, considering how much his people hated him.
He ruled with an iron fist. He would not be challenged by anyone. And they were constantly facing revolts from his own people because they didn't like this. They didn't want to be ruled by this one guy. And then the Greeks certainly didn't want to be ruled by him.
Yeah, the first battle happened in 490 BC, and just 10 years later, in 480 BC, is when things started to take fire. But before that, the king of Greece, of course, we know was a democracy, but instead of having a president, they had a king, and it went through blood succession. And his name was Alexandrius. I haven't done any verbal assassination lately, and maybe I need to go in the. Nah, I'm not going to pick a fight.
Hang out with me and Lady Gravemaster on Twitter. Plenty of opportunity.
Leodarius or Alexandarius. More Greek names. You know how I am with Greek names. Horrible. He was the king at the time when the first attack of the Persians came, and he died, and then his other son died of an accident while he was out. Hey, Nina, hello for everybody else. I can't see chat right now. So third in line was Leonidas, and something about the Greek blood. No fear, no kneeling, no backing down.
No.
And before we get into the actual battle, I want to talk a little bit of differences between what the Greeks were doing and what the Persians were doing. The Greeks were unlike most nations, and I think Loki and I were talking about this beforehand. They taught many of the other nations of the world how to fight. First thing was they wore armor. You see these pictures from these shows, and yeah, bare-chested guys, you know. For the ladies, it looks good. For the guys, it looks like, yeah, you know, time to fight, bring out the blood. But they actually had armor. It wasn't as extensive as like middle-age armor, but they did have chest plates and significant shields, and their spears were longer than everybody else's, and they knew how to use them. The Persians had leather-based armor and shorter spears, and they relied heavily, very heavily, on arrows, their archery. Now, after the first battle, the Greeks were not quite as prepared for another one. They thought they had to deal with more infighting around them with their other neighbors than they had to worry about the Persians coming back. So while they were dealing with that, Xerxes decided, I'm going to finish my father's work. I am going to amass an incredible army, and then we are going to go back and we are going to teach those Greeks how to kneel, whether they like it or not. So what he did, and was in the process of this whole time when Leonidas was working with his own country, and reports are different. It depends on who you talk to. It was either a force of 250,000 or 2 million. At one point, some said it was only 150,000, but I think the general consensus nowadays, what I could find, was that the Persians had an army of, we're going to say 250,000 against what Leonidas could gather.
7,000.
And not only that, now the movie shows that these battles go side by side, but history shows that they weren't side by side. And the character that is Greek named, which I cannot pronounce, that Loki has, learned from Leonidas how to bottleneck forces. And so they were close together, but not exactly at the same time. But going back to Persia, Xerxes, their king, decided we are going to bring in also 300 ships and hit them from two fronts. was a reasonable plan, but they were going against brilliant strategists, an unreasonable and unbending will of the Greeks. Okay, two things at this point. One is Leonidas and his people discovered that the Persians were coming. And most of you know that the Greeks were very religious, and they also had a oracle.
Yep.
So Leonidas decided, go ahead.
Just something, I don't want to interrupt you. I just want to throw this something interesting here. Guys, the oracles were chosen from the most beautiful women in Greece. And when I say this was not something you wanted, it was not something you wanted. Okay? These were young, beautiful women, and this was more of a curse than it was. So when you think about like today, the Hollywood stars and the most beautiful people get to be in movies and yada, yada, yada. Well, back in the day, guys, this was the worst. You did not want to be this. You didn't want to be this because
your life was gone.
Yeah, your life was gone. Go ahead, sir.
No. But this oracle was pretty impressive. And most of the time, you hear stories that they were actually inspired. You can hear stories that these oracles were touched by some type of magic object or some, the ancient aliens say that there was some alien device that was teaching them. And there's some that say there was gas springs where these people were on a natural high from this methane gas or whatever sulfuric gas that was freaking their mind out to where they were able to see things, but who knows? But either way, we do have a copy of the prophecy as close as they could figure it out. And I'm going to read it to you. This comes from Harvard University. And Herodotus, if he was correct in the English translation, this is what he said the prophecy was. For you, inhabitants of wide-wayed Sparta, either your great and glorious city must be wasted by Persian men, or if not that, then the blood of Lacedaemon must mourn a dead king from Hercules' line, which I didn't know that Leonidas, they say he was from Hercules' line.
Yep, descended directly from Hercules.
The might of bulls or lions will not restrain him with opposing strength, for he is the might of Zeus. I declare that he will not be restrained until he utterly tears apart one of these. So the prophecy basically said that if you don't go, the Spartans are gone. If you go, you're going to die, but you're going to win. So, there's something about these Spartans. He didn't even think twice. He was a young man. He was only 29 years old. He just married his cousin. And it was time to show what you were made of, and it was time to go and defend your people. He was a king. He could have done anything he wanted. He could have sent people in his stead. But what he did was choose a brilliant strategy. And he chose the bravest that he could out of the Spartans for the time, and whatever volunteers he could get from the neighboring countries. Because they were fighting, but they said, you know what, the Persians are worse. We're coming.
And there's a scene in 300 that it's actually supposed to be from the original tale. I think it was Hercules, I think that was his name, that wrote, give me just a second, Herodotus.
Yeah, he was a historian, yep.
The historian that wrote this. And there's a scene in the movie where the Athenians show up, and he asked them, he said, what do you do? Oh, I'm a potter, sir. What do you do? I'm a baker. What do you do?
Right.
A blacksmith. What do you do? And he goes through and then he turns around. Leonidas turns around and said, Spartans, what do you do? And he tells the Athenians, see, my friend, I brought more soldiers than you did.
Well, it shows too, because when things start to hit the fan, a lot of those volunteers or people that were brought in from other nations, and even a few Spartans, left. Now, this was not the end of the battle. This isn't at the end of the 3 days. This is beforehand. There's about 600 or 700 that potters, farmers, and people who had never seen blood decided it was better to run away than to stand. And who knows, you come up with all these Spartans and the fire that's in their eyes, and you think, I've just been plowing all the time. I can't really hold too much against them because they would feel inadequate or maybe in the way or who knows. But, I think for all of you in the audience here, I'm sure that at least seeing the way the chat goes and knowing the hearts of most of you from the way you talk, you would have stayed. You would have fought. And you wouldn't have bent the knee to some Persian king who walks on people's backs for his own pleasure, steals women and children, plunders nations just because he could. Now, the truth to the story is there was a group of soldiers that the Persians had, very special select men. They called them the Immortals.
Yep.
And they come into play in the battle too. The Immortals are ones that were known to never tire in battle. They had extreme endurance. And the other thing was the Persians relied very heavily on archery. And speaking of archery, boom, Colin comes up.
I hadn't realized that Herodotus was born just before Thermopylae, so it was within living memory when he was writing. Yes.
Yeah, he knew people that knew the story, probably some veterans of the battles afterwards, because there were a couple of people that were able to escape and tell the story, and one of them shouldn't have escaped according to most of the Spartans, and he ended up taking the suicide route because he was so embarrassed. But it's kind of tough to fight when you're blind, but that's the Spartan way. Anyway, there's that thing about arrows. You want to go with that, Loki?
Yeah, Dionysius, if that's how you say it right, Dionysius, was Leonidas's most trusted warrior. This was the warrior who was the bravest, strongest of all the Spartans. And the Persians had said that they made a threat. This was before the battle. There were a couple of days where the Spartans were at the hotgates before the battle started. And it actually went on for 7 days. 3 days of battle, 4 days before the battle. And when they were threatened, when they said that our arrows are so many, we will fire a multitude of arrows so great that it will obscure the light of the sun. He is the one who said, then we will fight in the shade. The battle against them will be in the shade, so don't worry. We won't be in the sun. We won't.
Good news, men. I think that's literally what he said, good news. We're going to be fighting in the shade.
Yeah, we're going to be fighting in the shade. We won't have to worry about the sun on our backs.
All right. Is there any way you could share that picture that I gave you?
Give me just a second. Yes, there is, but you're going to need to give me just a second.
Okay. Well, what he has is, and I most of us have probably never seen the actual battlefield, but they're still finding arrows. There were so many arrows shot that in this location, the people are still finding arrows from the battle 2,500 years ago. And the landscape has changed a little bit. When you see this image, the waterfront would be closer to where the battle is as opposed to where it is there. Now you could see how they built houses and stuff on the cliffs, but the Persians were coming in from the left side, I believe, and all of the right was all Spartan. So in order for them to get into the country deep and head towards Athens, which is what their ultimate goal was, they had to get through that bottleneck. Now you could imagine 300 trying to guard something that wide. It was a little more narrow at the time, but even still, the strategic value of fighting on foot was incredible. And also you could think of that sky being blackened with arrows. You had to have good shields, otherwise they would have tore you apart. And they were very smart about it.
Yep.
There was something that is quoted in Valhalla all the time. Shield wall, one of Samantha Joe's favorite things. This is where the world learned of the shield wall, where it was given to the Romans, then to the Vikings. They learned this from the Greeks, who were able to stand against literal hailstorm of arrows for 3 days and withstand it.
And they bring up the actual name of that maneuver in the movie 300. It is called the phalanx. And it is where you are shield to shield, completely protected in a wall, shield wall. And as you are fighting, your spears are slipping over the top of the shields, stabbing anyone in front of you, and you constantly move forward. You're constantly pushing back against the enemy. So if someone does, if you're in the middle of this and they decide, well, we want to shoot our arrows into our own guys while you're fighting in this, what they would do is the back lines would raise their shield over the first line defenders, so that the first line defenders could continue to push forward and stab with their spears while everyone in back raised their shields so nothing could penetrate. And the Spartans had these big brass shields, these big, huge brass shields. They were just as big as they are in the movie. And like Adega said earlier, they had armor. They weren't fighting bare-chested like they did in this movie. They had plate, so they were protected from head to toe. They had their helmets, they had the plate, and they had their shields, and these were big ass shields.
Also, I mentioned earlier where they had these long spears, and the first day of battle, the estimates are, and of course, it's just estimates, and part of it is from finding artifacts, and part of it is from what historical records they could find. But estimates are that the first day there was 20,000 Persians that were killed. And you can imagine, the phalanx could only go so far because the bodies would start piling up. And a few wounded came out at the end of the day, and Xerxes was so pissed.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
We lost, and he didn't like losing. So he sent in his immortals. 10,000 of these guys who were supposed to never tire on day 2. Well, they weren't 10,000 at the end of the day 2. They had lost 1,000. They fought well, but they didn't do the job that they were sent in to do. They were held back for day 3, at the end of day 3. But these long spears, this phalanx, this shield wall, and these indomitable spirits of freedom held for 3 days. Now, unfortunately, and you guys know this, and who knows if the guy was, what was it, some type of twisted deformity of the traitor that was in the movie?
All that is really known for a fact is that Ephialtes was a local. He was someone that lived close to the hotgates, to Thermopylae, and knew about a back way to get the Persian army behind the Greek line.
Right. And the movie from the 60s is different from the more recent one. But the thing is, and it was very common for the Persians to take a person's family and torture them or kill them to persuade people to do what they want. So this guy who told them may have thought he was going to save his family, may have been tortured for the first 2 or 3 days. We don't know. Either way, the news or the information of, it was bronze.
Yes.
But that news of the back pass was what the immortals took on the 3rd day. Now, there's discrepancies about this next part of the story. There are stories that say that Leonidas wanted to save as many lives as he could and sent men away to gather the rest of Sparta and the Greeks to make a defense. And some of those were the ones that went and told the Navy of how to withstand against so many forces.
At 4,000, I believe, was the number that left. 4,000 soldiers left.
Yeah. I think that's the general accepted. Yeah. But the other story is that they ran away, and I don't believe that. After fighting for 2 days, it's not a way that I would see that these people would have taken. From most estimates and from what I could gather from several different sources, but like I said, there's just so much different people saying things about this history and then people trying to rewrite it nowadays. But best estimates were that it was a strategic withdrawal, and to buy time, Leonidas with his men stood and fought on 2 fronts, both in front and the immortals coming from behind.
And it was their Alamo. It very much was their Alamo, because the forces that Leonidas sent away, which I completely agree with Adega, spread what the Spartans did all throughout Greece, and said if 300 Spartans can take on however many it was, whether it was 1 million or 250,000, it was the biggest army anyone had ever seen. If Leonidas can take out that many Persians with his 300 Spartans, imagine what all of Greece could do when it works together, which they weren't doing. They were arguing. Some people wanted to kneel. Some people didn't. Obviously, Leonidas was like, nah, we ain't doing that. We'll go and fight them. And as all this was going on, there was another battle taking place, and that was Themistocles' battle in the ocean. All of this was happening together. So if you watch 300 and you watch 300 Rise of an Empire, both of those battles were taking place at the same time. Themistocles goes and he talks to Leonidas. It doesn't ever show that in the movie because they couldn't get the actor to come back and play Leonidas again. And he actually talks to his wife. But in reality, he went and talked to Leonidas and he said, if you can hold them here, I will hold them here. And that will give us enough time to rally all of Greece and get Greece to fight together. And it wasn't working until after Leonidas and his Spartans died, stopping the Persians. It wasn't until they proved we can take this son of a bitch out that the tide in Greece changed. If they hadn't have done what they did, if they hadn't have died, if they hadn't have protected the hotgates, Greece could have been completely taken over by the Persians, because it would have been that entire Persian army of 250,000 soldiers versus 10,000 Spartans, 20,000 Spartans. And they would not have won. They would have put up a hell of a fight, but they would not have won. It took all of Greece banding together and fighting against the Persians to make this work. and you wouldn't have had that. It's the same as the Alamo. The Alamo hadn't have happened, it wouldn't have rallied troop support, and things could be very, very different now than they are. And this was their big hoo-ah. But anyway, you had two battles. You had both battles going on at the same time. And the Greeks were kicking the shit out of the Persians on the water, even though they were outnumbered, what was it, 5-1 on ships?
I think it was a little greater than that. But no, they tore them up. They tore them up. That fleet was pretty much decimated, the Persian fleet. I think they even had some water issues too. Truly, not just battle. You know, it's not just Hollywood either. That there were some weather issues that were definitely on the favor of the Greeks.
Yes, the mad. I believe what did they call it? Mad Greek weather.
Right, and I don't know when Greek fire was introduced, if it was involved with that sea battle there or not. I don't know if any of you. I'm sure all of you know what Greek fire is. We just don't know how to make it anymore. But I kind of think they did use it then. I mean, it's been a while since I went through that. I think it was used at that sea battle, but I'm not sure.
But yeah, it's one of the reasons why it took 5 days for battle to commence at Thermopylae was because the Persians got the shit kicked out of them when they got to Greece. It was so bad, their ships were crashing against each other. They lost, I think it was 50,000 men before they ever hit the shore. So one of the, I know one of the historians that looked at this as maybe it is very possible that the Persians had 500,000 troops when they left. They didn't get to Greece with that many troops.
Right. There are archaeological finds that they attribute to under the ocean there. They attribute to that battle. They found Persian ships there, which I thought was just simply astonishing that after 2,000 years they're finding fragments of these boats, which proves that the historians were correct.
And Colin P. Smith is correct. Fought the Persians at Salamis, another bottleneck. Yes, they baited the Persian ships to come after them and then surrounded them. The tactic they used is very much something that a lot of Americans know, which is called circle the wagons. They had 3 different lines of ships all in a circle, all traveling in opposite directions. So you had a circle moving clockwise, a circle moving counterclockwise, and then an inner circle moving clockwise again. And they opened that. They opened it like a gate. And as the Persian ships came into range, they surrounded them and just battered the shit out of them. And back then, there was the only thing that you had for long range, the only thing the Greeks had for long range was hoplites. So they would be sitting there throwing spears. They would be throwing spears. The Persians would be firing bows. But again, the Greeks had shields. The Greeks had big, beefy shields. So whenever the ships came into range, if you didn't just plow through one, you hopped on it and took them out. It was immediate hand-to-hand combat. That's how the ships worked. The Romans did the same thing for a long time before the Romans started shooting at other ships. What they would do is they would ram them and a little boarding ramp would pop down. The Romans were seriously underappreciated for this. When they would hit another ship, a boarding ramp would pop out and they would just run over there, get in their phalanx and start fighting and take them all out until everyone on the ship was dead. They'd fight in hand-to-hand combat. Ship battles rarely had munitions. It wasn't until later with the Romans that you had lots of fire. We talked about Greek fire. Adega mentioned Greek fire. Whether or not they implemented this in this battle, no one ever talked about it. It's not something that...
Yeah, so we don't know. But I know they had it, but when they had it, I don't know. Another thing, you brought that up because that was part of the Thermopylae, the battle there. They had, oh no.
Unknown to many, there was a heroic 301st Spartan then known as Mexicanus Ironmanus, aka the Spaniard, who was at that time in charge of the Spartan food and beverage taco cart.
Need fuel to fight. What better fuel than tacos?
And then tacos. And falafels.
No, but you brought up that thing with the ships. That was something that happened also in that bottleneck at Thermopylae. The Spartans would put up their defense, their shield wall, and the hail of arrows would come, and then they would stop, and the armies would come and approach, and they baited them there too. They would run back about 100 yards. The Persians would think, we got them on the run. They would run in, and at the last second, the phalanx would reform. It was all to bait them, get them off their guard, and they would slaughter them again. It was an amazing tactic. It worked every time they did it. You would think the Persians would have figured it out, but they never did.
And they just did that over and over. If it works, that's the thing. If it works, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Right. Think of it like if you're, well, no one watches football anymore, but some of the better games that you watched, you'd had the offensive team would pick a play, they would run the play, it would be successful. Well, if your defense think, well, they're never going to do that again, and they do it again. Well, they did it twice, why would they do it again? And they do it again. You just over and over keep fooling them. And it was the same with the Persians. They're not going to do that again, and yet they do over and over.
That is called a bread and butter offense.
Is that what that's called?
Yes, it is. It's called a bread and butter offense. Basically, you have 3 or 4 plays with a few variations of each play, and you make it work. You drill, and that's all you do is drill and drill and drill until you are the best experts at running those plays, and it's overwhelming. It's completely overwhelming. And it can be such a small alteration that all it is you're going to run left instead of right this time. That's it. You run left instead of right. Very simple offensive play is in the I formation. If you are a halfback, your fullback will be lined up to the right of you. It's a handoff play. You drive beside the guard and the tackle. And what you do is you follow the fullback through the hole. If you flip that, all the fullback has to do is run and act like he's going to grab the ball from the quarterback. He doesn't. The quarterback drops back one more step, hands the ball, and you go left instead of right down your regular hole. But you still go between the guard and the tackle. So it's the exact same play. You're just going left instead of right. Bread and butter plays. Not to get into sports, because God knows. But yeah, a bread and butter offense consists of 3 or 4 plays that you have some minor alterations to here and there, but you become such an expert at doing that over and over and over again to your opponent that you are literally the best at running those plays. Instead of having a giant playbook there that can be very complicated, that people can forget, oh, what am I doing this time? What am I doing? And you make mistakes. This is drilled into you over and over and over again so that you don't make mistakes. There are no mistakes. And that's exactly what the Spartans did. That is exactly what the Spartans did.
Plus, they were fighting for a better country for better reasons than what the Persians were, who were fighting for blood, glory, and also for their protection of their own lives. You know, with all those rebellions and the abuses of the power, they were fighting out of fear more than anything else. Except for maybe the immortals, they were probably treated pretty well.
Yeah.
But the Greeks and like Cathia, Yeah, I saw you, sis. Put in there that the majority of the civilization there in times in Greece, the commerce was ran by the women. The men were to protect them at all costs, and they took that as a holy calling.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Now, we talked about the Alamo, and we're talking about here, and there's a couple of things, and I wanted to bring it to us today. The battlefields were different at the Alamo. They used muskets and some rifles and bayonets, and here on the phalanx of the Spartans, spears, arrows, and shields. And today, for the most part, it's words. Doesn't mean that the pain that's caused by the enemy doesn't do damage because it's words, because we see words are being shut down, people are being silenced or shamed or this or that, the other. But I wanted to bring up something. You guys have probably seen this. I've never watched The Mandalorian, but the actress who did Cara Dune, because of her stance against what's really immoral.
Problems tonight. Oh, I keep getting kicked off here. Sorry. I'm not trying to remove you. This is like the fourth time I booted off my own stream tonight.
I thought you just liked the hot picture I have there.
Oh, I just thought you liked mine.
Yeah, the hairy armpits do it for me. But she was being persecuted by these same people who get in their little corners, sit around their tables, and run their little sniffs, going, "Oh yeah, we gotta get them," and sniffing their own farts, and making up rules after rules after rules, however many it takes to embarrass people, to silence people, and make them feel like they're important. And she got caught up in it. And she stood her ground, thank goodness. And it was a rallying cry. She got to see that there are forces greater than just her own voice that have been screaming at this fight. And we're all gathering. That's why we're here tonight. That's why we see these people in our communities, and our communities need to expand. And the thing is if they kick one of us off, you come back with a different name, or you come back with a different group. The shield wall won't fail. The philosophies that have been developed over centuries of decency and republic will not fail. The horrific troubles that were coming behind the army of the Persians are at our doors as well. I guess it got kicked off again. There was, unfortunately, I spend time on Twitter periodically, and Loki and I were talking about this briefly, and it comes up every once in a while, but there are some horrific things that are showing up in our society, and it is actually propagated against family and children. But you guys already know, the line has been drawn for me. And I take courage, not that I would ever give up, not that I would ever surrender, and you know darn well I will never kneel. But I take courage that our voices are growing in strength. There was recently a group of, they're anarchists. They say Black Lives Matter, but they're not. They are terrible communists, not quite anarchists, that were coming into a neighborhood to come and persecute their police chief. And for the past 70 days, they've been pretty much unopposed, for a little bit here and there, picking on themselves. But they came into this neighborhood, and this neighborhood pulled up a car, and some of you have seen the video. They pulled out their weapons, and they said the line ends here. And those people said, we're peaceful. Why are you pointing a gun at us? And the lady said one of the most incredible things lately. Says, that's why you are peaceful. It's because we have made a stand. And sometimes the only way to win these battles is to be the one that stands up. Like these Spartans. Their country would have fallen if it wasn't for the courage and the sacrifice of these men. There was one of the guys in the battle, and I think it was in the movie, I can't remember, who was blinded, and he went and fought anyway as a blind man. You all have a voice. Your voice is your spear. The line goes no further. Don't be afraid to speak, because that's what they live on, is your fear. You want backup, you got it. We're all a family here.
That's right.
And we don't sit here, Loki and I do these evenings on Thursdays just because it's cool history. But it's also courage. It also is fuel for the soul to know that these battles, granted, we're not bleeding. Some of us are. It has come to that. But it will give us courage to stand up regardless of who wants to oppose you, who wants to throw you off of which platform, who wants to shut down your Patreon. And you should know that Patreon's losing the battle now. A year ago, you would have thought it was never seen, or something you would never see, that such a powerful new company would be put on its heels and running scared, and yet they are. And look at Disney for all the things that they've been pushing out the past few years, who are now on their heels and running scared. And for all the silent arrests that most of you probably don't know about, some of you do, of very terrible people doing very terrible things is going on. Now is not the time to be silent. Now is the time to yell and to be part of the shield wall, to be part of the phalanx, to push forward, to learn the lessons of what Loki and I have been sharing with you, of people in the past who have given everything. Live free or die, join or die, come and take it. That actually was part of some of the original Spartans with Darius, They said, you want to come and take it. That's where we learned it from, was these Greeks. But like I said, the battle's been joined, and I don't step down. I won't back down. And I have, honestly, your back. When there's trouble, you let us know. The whole group of us. And it will be joined by others. Because we learn from history. We don't learn from morons who try and tell you silly things and keep your minds from working properly. Logic is here. Reason is here. And we are the educated people who have been able to see that the follies of the past are upon us once again. And I had told you guys before, my mother and father lived through the Depression and the Second World War, and they saw, even though they try and put a different name on it to hide their identity, they are the fascists. You want to know what it was like being World War II? You ask any of the people, any of the greatest generation that are still alive, you're looking at them. The ones that said that, oh, you cannot shop on these days. Well, you can't go to the store unless you have a mask. You have to be one of us. Well, screw that.
Screw that.
I stand with you.
We stand with you.
If you see me take a knee, don't stand in front of me because you know I'm pointing. My laser is on something. Or my scope is out 500 yards away. And yes, I can do that. And I know Loki can too.
That's right. And I want to say one thing before we hop off of here. Before I say thank you to everybody, I want to say one thing. It came to my attention the other day that someone, whether they were joking or not joking, said something very interesting. They said, where does Loki buy his support? Where does he buy his support? Where does he go to purchase his support? And I'll tell you guys something. The Roman Empire fell because instead of training and maintaining its own army, they bought mercenaries to fight for them. And when battle commenced, those mercenaries ran. When the Persians invaded Greece, and they had men literally running off cliffs to get away from the Spartans, those were subjugated people. They weren't soldiers standing, defending the things they loved. They were slaves, or they were bought. They were being paid to fight. No one that supports me here, no one that supports Adega, no one that supports the Valkyries, no one that supports Eris, no one that supports any of us is paid for. When you have to buy support, it is not support. You cannot count on them. And I can count on each and every person in Valhalla. I can count on each and every person in chat. I can count on each and every one of you to stand with us, because we've never done that, and we won't ever do that, because that's how you lose. When you have to buy support, you didn't earn it. And we earn every inch of ground we take. We earn every hour of YouTube we've got, because everything we have is in this.
A heart can be crushed. A heart can be crushed, but not when it's given freely.
No, thank you.
And when it's given freely for the right cause, it's an unquenchable fire.
Damn straight. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Kronos, welcome and good night. Castle, thank you. Gathia Star, thank you so very much. I have loved your comments tonight, Gathia. Crimson Mist, Purple Valkyrie, thank you so very much. Mark the Infinitely Tired, Colin P. Smith, excellent comments. Eastland Burkholder, all of you, thank you so much for the comments. Thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight. We keep coming back with these, and I keep absolutely loving the time I'm getting to spend talking about this stuff with Adega. We didn't even really crack it all. We really didn't. But
sorry, I get on my tangents.
No, don't apologize. No, they're excellent. I love, dude. Someone said the other day, I could listen to Adega read stock reports and be entertained.
Yeah, I'm not into reading stock reports.
So everyone, take care. Have a wonderful night tonight. You all have a great one. Thank you, Mark. My chat's not updating. I don't know why I can't highlight shit. The last thing I got is Colin P. Smith saying it was a mark of respect. That's the last comment I got. I know you guys are still throwing out comments and saying great show and thank you, and we thank you and appreciate it. I just can't highlight it. So everybody there, have a great night. Hopefully all of this YouTube nonsense with the kicking me off will be over and done with tomorrow. But we'll see you for Friday's stream, and hopefully a game stream tomorrow. I'm going to try and put a game stream together. But if any of you are up late tonight, check out Bill's Insomniac Soup. I know he's going to go live. He goes not live at midnight every night. and we will catch you guys later. Thanks again, everybody.
These videos are tremendous. Like, comment, and subscribe, and hammer that notification bell.